Welcome to recommending a virtual machine-based compute solution. In this lesson, you'll learn when it's best to recommend a VM-based compute solution. Azure VMs are an infrastructure as a service offering that can be used in several scenarios. Deploying a VM solution allows you to completely customize any software that runs on those VMs. That being the case, virtual machines are often recommended when you run custom software. They are also often the solution of choice when you need total control over the operating system or when you have specific hosting needs that aren't fulfilled by other compute offerings. It's important to remember that when you deploy a VM, you're responsible for configuring the VM itself, updating it, and maintaining the software that runs on that VM. When you sit the AZ-305 exam, you're likely to be presented with specific scenarios, and you'll be asked to decide if a VM is the proper compute solution. That being the case, let's review some scenarios where you might want to use VMs. Testing and dev environments are the very first example that comes to mind. Because virtual machines are easy to deploy and configure, they allow you to quickly spin up different OS and application configurations that your developers can use for testing. Because they're easy to delete, your developers can just as easily delete their VMs when they're no longer needed. Another common use case for virtual machines is when you need or want to run certain applications in the cloud, rather than building out an entire physical infrastructure to support those apps. In these cases, cloud-based VMs can offer significant cost savings. This use case often crops up when an organization deploys an application that might need to handle fluctuations in demand. In these situations, you can simply shut down VMs when demand drops. You can then start them back up if you need to meet a sudden increase in demand. This allows you to only pay for the resources that you use. As many organizations make the move to the cloud, they sometimes find that they can't leave their on-prem data centers behind for various reasons. In these cases, virtual machines and virtual networks can be used to extend their on-prem data centers to the cloud. What this does is allows the organization to run apps like SharePoint on Azure virtual machines instead of running them on physical servers that reside in the on-prem data center. This makes it easier and sometimes even less expensive to deploy apps like these than it would be if they were deployed on-prem. Now, of course, we also have disaster recovery. By extending an on-prem data center to the cloud, you can run certain types of apps in the cloud on VMs. If the primary data center fails, you can create VMs in Azure to run your critical apps. Once the primary data center comes back up, those VMs can be shut down. Think Azure Site Recovery. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention lift and shift here as well. Virtual machines are a good choice when you want to move from a physical on-prem server to the cloud. This is the definition of lift and shift. When you want to lift and shift to the cloud, what you typically do is you create an image of your physical server. You then use that image to create a VM. Now, while you do have to maintain the VM just like you would a physical box, you do get the benefits of cloud compute and availability that you might not get by remaining on-prem. Now, while you can often leverage single VMs for testing and dev, there will also be times when you need high availability, scalability, and redundancy. In these situations, VM scale sets are often a good choice, because the number of instances in the scale set can automatically increase or decrease based on demand, or even based on a defined schedule that you create. They allow you to run large-scale workloads in the cloud. And then the last example of a VM use case is a scenario where you need to run a large-scale parallel jobs or high-performance computing batch jobs with the ability to massively scale. Now, in these scenarios, you'd likely recommend Azure Batch. What Azure Batch does is allow you to run these types of large jobs while also providing the ability to scale to tens, hundreds, or even thousands of VMs. So the key takeaway here is that while you may often be better off leveraging platform as a service where you can, there will be scenarios where VMs and infrastructure as a service are the better choice. These scenarios are shown on your screen. Keep these scenarios in mind when you sit the AZ-305 exam, because if you do, you should have an easier time of knowing when to recommend a VM-based compute solution.